Hey guys, Michael from 90 Plus. Here we are for another quote interpretation. So this time we're looking at journalism. Let's jump in. It is a tenet of journalism that reporters working for the news section of newspapers remain entirely independent of the opinion section. So the first thing that jumps out at me, tenet, that says to me, if this is true, then there's obviously some good reason why, and that there's some wisdom in that. Now, I don't know a great deal about journalism, but obviously I think, or it seems to me that this prompt is asking me to cast around and to conjecture as to why might that be. So let's have a think. Why should the reporters for the news section be independent of the opinion? I think in the first instance, it's a necessary fact of news. I don't know necessary, but it's a desirable, let's say, fact of the news section that it be unbiased. And I think actually, if you look at prompt 2, we're accustomed to the ideal of objectivity, but I think that it's the very nature of giving an opinion that there's a bias associated with that, because humans are political creatures. We are homo narrans, the storytelling creature. All right, so I think the first thing that stands out to me is simply that it's reinforcing 2. So it's almost 2 is the fact, and that's supported by 1. And I think also as a secondary reason, just from a business perspective, perhaps if there were any opinion that were too controversial, the newspaper might want to be able to isolate the damage and chalk it down to one kind of maverick reporter, rather than it reflecting the main job of the newspaper to report the news as a whole. So that would be my second reason. Okay. Prompt 2, consumers of the news are accustomed to the ideal of objectivity. See, the word accustomed, though, almost says as if it's a luxury that we've gotten used to, but perhaps we shouldn't. So I think actually this person's almost suggesting that there is no objectivity in news. And that perhaps there are certain, let's say, conglomerations like the Murdoch Group that have a great deal of sway in political opinion and how things are reported. And we certainly see that in for example, the news agency, I've forgotten the name now, in North Korea, in Russia. So I think it's an ideal, but the use of the word ideal suggests to us that actually we don't ever achieve that ideal. And I think that's inviting a discussion of why not. Okay, prompt 3. The purpose of an opinion section is to supply the wide-ranging debate about big ideas that a diverse democracy needs. Okay, wide-ranging debate, the first thing that stands out to me. So I'm always looking for things that didn't need to be there, or that seem superfluous, or just, I guess, the key bits. It occurs to me that wide-ranging debate, big ideas, diverse democracy, and needs are all the main things here. So let's start with wide-ranging debate. I'm not sure that we live in a world that is as accommodating of wide-ranging debate and respect for different views as we once were. It seems to me that there are in this where even the ordinary parts of human life are becoming politicized, that there is increasing. And I think also, too, mind you, that this is fed into by things like the way that our online worlds create echo chambers of our own views, and therefore intolerance of other views. And I think also that that's a feature of modernity, intolerance of other worldviews. So I think that there is less tolerance of wide-ranging debate, and it seems to me that there are relatively or increasingly narrow ambits of acceptable discussion, and an increase in the assertion of unassailable truth on dogmatic facts, often around issues that, unlike in the past, where ideas were grounded and tethered, that while ideas are perhaps more inclusive and progressive today, that implies less, say, centralizing of opinion around ideals. So in antiquity, God is the center of the universe, and humans tended to concern themselves with metaphysical ideas, and there were certain positive ideals of religion and religious life, the cultivation of moral values and character, knowing God, for example. And then in modernity, I think there's less of a sense of positive ideals. What I mean by positive ideals is trying to get somewhere in particular. There's an idea that there's these ideas, inclusivity, progressiveness, that we are tending towards and aiming for, but it's not an ideal in the sense of that there's an endpoint. It's just kind of a direction. Okay, so let's move on from that. So wide-ranging debate. I'm not sure that it is wide-ranging debate. Big ideas. I think that's inviting a discussion of what are the big ideas today, and a diverse democracy. So. That's interesting to me. A diverse democracy needs. Why would a democracy that is diverse need debate? I suppose it's inherently democratic to contend with ideas that aren't your own. That's the first thing. It seems to me that this is almost a misnomer because many democracies, and perhaps I'm only restricting this to kind of like America and Australia, but they're bipartisan, which is to say there's two parties. And when there's two parties, they hold each other in a kind of constructive, maybe, attention, let's say, where they both, it makes the right more left and the left more right. In the sense that, let's take Labor and Liberal in Australia. For Liberal to get voted in, they need to appeal to some Labor voters. Liberal voters are already going to vote Liberal. They need to bring in Labor voters. In order to do that, they need to have more left policies in order to bring in those voters. And similarly, Labor on the other side are already going to get the Labor voters. They need to attract Liberal voters to Labor. And so they need to have some policies that accommodate or talk to the interests of the Labor side to draw them in. And because both of these parties need to do that in order to be successful, it actually brings both toward the centre and holds them this kind of structural tension. So I'm not sure that democracies are particularly diverse. It seems to me that you've got a two-party system in most of them, and you're going to get one or the other. And that they're both relatively central. Okay, and then the last thing, needs. Why does a diverse democracy need debate? I don't think I have time in the GAMSAT to properly think that out. I'm not sure that it does necessarily. Anyway, I would move on in the interest of time. Strong institutions, like strong families, are meant to transmit principles across generations. The first impression I get of this is quite patriarchal, not in the sense of like a feminist patriarchal in more like a medical sense, in the sense of I'm going to direct you and this is where you need to go, which is perhaps what feminists mean by patriarchy. I'm not sure. Strong institutions like strong is a very aesthetic judgment. So, I was saying earlier how in antiquity that God was the center of the universe and we concerned ourselves with metaphysical ideas. Then in modernity, man was the center of the universe. Nietzsche said God is dead, and epistemology, which is to say, what is a good grounds to be certain about something, became the central concern of humans. And then now in post-modernity, there's a vacuum of power. Everyone's got Dr. Google, and axiology, which is to say values, aesthetics, and ethics is the main concern. So I have my aesthetic judgments on things, and they're mine, and you shouldn't interfere. So strong seems to me to be an aesthetic judgment. I meant to transmit principles. What principles? To me, this is explicitly speaking of religion. The principles that are supposed to be transmitted are religious principles, ideas of the nuclear family, ideas of man's subordination to God, ideas of moral character and virtue and what that looks like. And I think it's almost implied here a little bit that if you don't transmit those principles, that there is a lack of strength, which is obviously quite controversial. If you feel strongly about that matter, I would advise you not to write an essay on it, as it may cause you to present yourself psychometrically in a way that is not as favourable to the marker as you might. We're coming up to 10 minutes, so I might leave that one there, but I hope that's given you a taste of what you might like to talk about or what each of these prompts is gesturing towards. Okay, thanks guys. Bye.